The crystalline dome of Nexus Prime's Grand Council chamber refracted light across the massive marble-clad hall. Overhead, the ceiling depicted the 1,000-star systems that comprised the Galactic Council's domain. Each pinpoint of light pulsing with a soft luminescence that corresponded to real-time data from its respective world. For over 10 millennia, this chamber had hosted the peaceful deliberations that maintained stability across known space. The laws protecting primitive species, the regulations governing interstellar commerce, and the treaties preventing technological apocalypse, all had been crafted beneath this artificial sky. Katie Morrison, Earth's representative, stood at her designated platform, her posture rigid with pride, even as anxiety churned beneath her composed exterior. The criticisms of humanity had grown louder in recent decades. Too ambitious, too unpredictable, too dangerous for a stable galactic community. She had weathered these accusations with diplomatic skill, but today felt different. The air seemed charged with an unfamiliar tension. The year was 4385 by Earth's millennium count. Most citizens of the Galactic Council no longer bothered with chronological measurements. In a civilization spanning 10,000 years of uninterrupted peace, time became less relevant than stability. But humans, even after centuries among the stars, maintained their peculiar obsession with marking the passage of years. Cold light bathed the representatives of 850 species as they filled the chamber. Whispers echoed throughout the hall, creating an unsettling ambient noise that rose and fell like the tide. Katie's enhanced hearing, one of the few permitted augmentations for council representatives, caught fragments of conversations in dozens of languages, most centered on Earth and its colonies. Speaker Zark, a towering figure with iridescent scales and 6 limbs arranged in perfect symmetry, ascended to the central dais. Unlike most council members, Zark's species had evolved on a world with extreme gravitational fluctuations, giving them both physical resilience and an almost pathological aversion to change of any kind. His voice, amplified by the chamber's acoustics, silenced all conversation. "Representatives of the Galactic Council," he began, his multiple vocal cords creating a harmonic resonance that commanded attention. "We have concluded our deliberations regarding the status of humanity within our collective. The vote has been recorded, 847 in favor, 3 opposed." Katie's fingers tightened around the edge of her podium, knuckles white with tension. She had expected this outcome, but anticipation did nothing to soften the blow. "Humanity is hereby stripped of its council membership," Zark continued, his tone betraying no emotion. "All human settlements within council space must be evacuated within 30 standard days. Any human vessels remaining in council territory after this period will be considered in violation of sovereign space and treated accordingly." The chamber erupted. Some representatives cheered, others protested, and many simply watched in stunned silence. Among the smaller delegations, those representing younger civilizations or minor powers, Katie noticed expressions of sadness and concern. They understood what the dominant species did not. Katie maintained her composure as she activated a small device concealed within her ceremonial collar. A single command: Protocol Exodus. 3 encrypted syllables that would now cascade across human space, initiating contingency plans centuries in the making. No verbal response was needed from the receivers. The signal itself was confirmation enough. On the UHS Independence, the flagship of humanity's deep space fleet, Admiral Jack Carter received the signal while reviewing patrol schedules in his private quarters. His weathered face showed no surprise, only grim resolution. He had served as military advisor to 3 Earth representatives, and all had warned him this day might come. He activated the ship's intercom. "All personnel, this is Admiral Carter. Protocol Exodus is now in effect. This is not a drill. I repeat, Protocol Exodus is now in effect." Throughout the massive vessel, crew members paused momentarily before accelerating into well-rehearsed emergency procedures. Similar scenes played out across every human military installation, colony ship, and trading post within Council space. A civilization of billions began to move as one, following plans that had existed since humanity first suspected its position within the Council might be precarious. On New Montana, the agricultural colony that provided 30% of the Council's specialty food crops, colony leader Sam Rodriguez received the signal while inspecting a new automated harvesting system. Without a word, he turned to his management team. "It's time," he said simply. "Initiate harvest protocols across all sectors simultaneously. Priority Alpha for seed banks and gene libraries." His team dispersed without questions. Within hours, every available harvester, both machine and human, would be working around the clock to collect what they could. Much would be left behind, but the most critical resources, the results of centuries of careful cultivation and genetic engineering, would be preserved. On Kepler-7, the research outpost that had become humanity's primary center for xenobiology and comparative planetary studies, Dr. Lisa Marshall felt her communication implant vibrate with the Exodus signal. She immediately locked her laboratory and initiated emergency data compression protocols. Decades of research began flowing into specialized quantum storage devices, prioritized by potential survival value. As the senior scientist present, she had one additional responsibility. "Attention all Kepler personnel," she announced over the facility's communication system. "Protocol Exodus is in effect. Begin evacuation procedures immediately. All collaborative research with Council species is hereby suspended." In the adjacent laboratory, her colleague, Dr. Elena Brooks, received the same signal, but made no move toward the evacuation assembly point. Instead, she calmly continued her work, sealing samples and uploading specific data sets to a secure partition that wouldn't be included in the general evacuation. Her Marani research partner, a semi-aquatic humanoid with brilliant purple skin, watched her with multifaceted eyes that reflected confusion and concern. "You received the signal," the Marani stated. "Not a question, but an observation." "I did," Elena confirmed, continuing her methodical work. "Yet you prepared differently than the others." Elena paused, meeting the Marani's gaze. "Some of us are staying behind, Trellix. The Council has made their decision about humanity's place in their community. Now, some of us must make our own decisions." Captain Ryan Murphy, of the transport vessel Horizon, stood on his bridge, watching as the evacuation of the research station Gamma 9 proceeded with remarkable efficiency. His ship was one of thousands now engaged in the greatest mass migration in human history. The Horizon had been constructed for exactly this purpose, ostensibly a civilian transport for colonial expansion, but with hidden compartments and augmented systems that gave it capabilities far beyond its official specifications. Sir," his navigation officer called out. "Council patrol vessels are moving to blockade the Perseus Junction. Standard evacuation routes will be compromised within 6 hours." Murphy nodded, unsurprised. "Alert the fleet. We're implementing shadow path protocols. Set course for the Dark Zone transit corridor." "Sir?" The young officer's voice betrayed concern. "That route hasn't been officially surveyed. The spatial distortions alone could—" "It's been surveyed," Murphy interrupted quietly. "Just not by anyone who shared their findings with the Council. Trust me, Ensign. We know where we're going." The Horizon altered course, followed by 11 other transports. Together, they accelerated toward a region of space that appeared empty on official charts, but contained precisely calculated spatial anomalies, artificial wormholes created through decades of clandestine human research. As they approached, the seemingly empty space shimmered and parted like a curtain, revealing a passage that shouldn't have existed according to Council physics. Back in the Council chamber, Katie Morrison maintained her position at the Earth podium, watching as the deliberations continued around her. Now that the vote had been recorded, representatives debated implementation details, the disposition of abandoned human infrastructure, the reassignment of trade routes, the division of resources. Few bothered to address her directly. In the council's eyes, she was already irrelevant. Her augmented vision allowed her to observe the real-time data flowing to her secure tablet. Thousands of human ships were already in motion across council space, following evacuation routes planned decades in advance. Some council members had positioned their fleets to intercept these evacuees. But these blockades encountered only automated decoy vessels, while the actual human transports slipped through alternate routes or improvised passage through unmapped regions. Zeltorin, the representative from Proxima Centauri's non-human civilization, approached Katie's podium. Unlike most council members, the Proximans had maintained cordial relations with humanity, despite pressure to conform to the growing anti-human sentiment. "This decision was short-sighted," Zeltorin whispered, their voice pitched below the range most species could detect. "Many of us recognize this, though too few had the courage to vote accordingly." Katie nodded slightly, but maintained her silence. Words were useless now. Only actions mattered. The Proximans would soon discover what humanity's expulsion truly meant for the Council's infrastructure, as would all the species who had grown dependent on human innovation while simultaneously fearing it. In the outer reaches of Council space, the evacuation proceeded with remarkable coordination. Colonies that had spent centuries establishing themselves abandoned their surface structures within days, taking only what was irreplaceable: genetic banks, cultural artifacts, specialized technologies. Material possessions were largely left behind. After centuries of interstellar living, humans had learned that physical objects were far less valuable than knowledge, skills, and adaptability. Admiral Carter coordinated the military aspect of the exodus from the Independence, ensuring defensive screens protected the civilian transports from potential harassment. To his surprise, few Council species attempted to interfere, whether from respect, indifference, or simple caution regarding human military capabilities. Most allowed the evacuation to proceed unimpeded. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving unusual signals from the Dark Zone border. Pattern matches Project Architect protocols." Carter nodded, a hint of satisfaction breaking through his professional demeanor. "Acknowledge and transmit confirmation codes. Tell them we're coming home." 3 weeks into the evacuation period, the first signs of trouble appeared in the Council's infrastructure. On Nexus Prime, the central hub of interstellar governance, environmental systems began experiencing unpredictable fluctuations. Temperature control faltered in government buildings. Water purification showed trace contaminants. Nothing immediately threatening, but distinctly abnormal in a system designed for perfect reliability. In the agricultural sectors that had supplied Council worlds for centuries, automated systems began reporting calibration errors. Harvesting schedules were disrupted. Distribution networks flagged unexpected shortages. Again, nothing catastrophic, merely the first tremors preceding an earthquake. Speaker Zark convened an emergency session as reports accumulated from across Council space. The massive chamber, usually a model of order and decorum, now hummed with anxious conversations. "The technical committee has completed its preliminary assessment," announced Belnara, the Council's Minister of Infrastructure. Her crystalline body structure caught the light as she projected a holographic display showing affected systems across Council territory. "We are experiencing unprecedented system failures across multiple sectors. The pattern suggests a coordinated event rather than random malfunctions." "Sabotage?" Zark's harmonics conveyed alarm. "By the departing humans?" "No evidence suggests active sabotage," Belnara replied, her voice precise and measured. "Rather, we appear to be experiencing the absence of regular maintenance and upgrades that were being performed without official documentation." She magnified a section of the display, showing maintenance logs from a central agricultural distribution hub. These systems should have failed centuries ago based on their original design parameters. Instead, they have been functioning at above specification levels through thousands of small, unauthorized modifications. Modifications made primarily by human technical personnel. The chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. "For how long?" Zark finally asked. "Based on our forensic analysis, approximately 700 years, Belnara answered. Since, shortly after humans joined the Council, their technical crews appear to have been systematically improving and maintaining critical infrastructure across Council space, implementing upgrades without formal approval or documentation." "Impossible!" sputtered the Dorn representative, whose species managed many of the Council's engineering projects. "Such activities would have been detected." "Not if they were deliberately concealed," Belnara countered, "and executed by thousands of individuals acting independently over centuries. We have recovered partial records from abandoned human facilities." She projected a new hologram, a map of system failures overlaid with the locations of former human technical installations. The correlation was undeniable. Zark stared at the display, his multiple limbs rigid with tension. "Why would they do this? And why conceal their actions?" Katie Morrison, who had maintained silent observation from her podium throughout these proceedings, finally spoke. Her voice carried clearly through the chamber despite its softness. "Because you would have forbidden it," she said simply. "You fear change, even beneficial change. Any proposed modification to Council systems requires decades of committee reviews and safety assessments. Meanwhile, critical infrastructure deteriorates. We simply did what needed to be done while you deliberated." "And now," Zark demanded. "Now you learn what it means to maintain your own systems," Katie replied. "The knowledge exists in your archives. The capacity exists among your species. What has always been lacking is not ability, but initiative." As if punctuating her statement, the chamber's environmental systems gave an audible shudder. The artificial stars overhead flickered momentarily before resuming their steady glow. Katie's communication implant vibrated with an incoming message. She reviewed it with a subtle gesture, then straightened her posture. "My transport departs in 20 minutes, she announced to the chamber. "According to the terms of our expulsion, I am permitted to address this body one final time before departing." She paused, looking around at the representatives of 850 species who had voted to cast humanity out of their community. "We built wonders among you," she said softly. "We maintained your infrastructure. We improved your agricultural yields. We explored regions you feared to enter. We did these things not because we sought acknowledgement, but because problem-solving is fundamental to human nature. We cannot witness inefficiency without seeking to correct it. We cannot encounter boundaries without testing them." The chamber remained silent. Hundreds of alien faces turned toward her in varying expressions of realization, anger, and fear. "You have the capacity to adapt," Katie continued. "Whether you possess the will to do so remains to be seen. Humanity leaves behind no sabotage, no hidden failures designed to punish you. We simply step away from systems we have quietly maintained for centuries. What happens next is in your hands." With that, she deactivated her translator, turned from the podium, and walked steadily toward the chamber's massive exit. No one moved to stop her. No voice called her back. Behind her, the representatives of the most powerful civilizations in known space sat in stunned silence, confronting the first existential uncertainty their society had faced in 10 millennia. Aboard the command vessel, Ascension, Katie watched through an observation portal as the last human ships departed Council space. The massive evacuation fleet, tens of thousands of vessels carrying the population of dozens of worlds, moved with coordinated precision toward the Dark Zone, that unmapped region between galactic arms that Council species had always avoided. Her aide approached with a data tablet. "Final reports from all evacuation zones," he said. 97.8% of registered human citizens successfully evacuated. The remainder chose to stay behind for various reasons, mostly mixed-species families or research teams like Dr. Brooks and her Marani colleagues. Katie nodded, still watching the fleet's movement. And the Council? Our monitoring systems show accelerating infrastructure failures. Their emergency response is inadequate. They lacked contingency plans for systems they didn't know could fail. They'll learn, Katie said, though uncertainty tinged her voice. They must. The Nexus feed is still transmitting, her aide added. Would you like to see? Katie hesitated, then nodded. A holographic display materialized before her, showing the council chamber she had left hours earlier. Chaos had replaced order. Representatives argued vehemently, while technical staff hurried between workstations. Speaker Zark stood at the central dais, attempting to maintain control of the proceedings, but his harmonic voice pattern had fractured, betraying his distress. Must establish emergency protocols for food distribution, one representative was saying. 17 worlds are reporting critical shortages already. The transit network is experiencing navigational failures. Another reported, vessels are stranded in mid-journey. We need immediate technical intervention. Speaker Zark raised all 6 limbs, demanding silence. Our technical committees are analyzing the human maintenance records. We will restore functionality to all essential systems. This temporary disruption. Temporary, the Proximan representative, Zeltorin, interrupted with uncharacteristic force. I have reviewed the preliminary reports. Do you understand what the humans were doing? They weren't simply maintaining our infrastructure. They were compensating for fundamental design flaws that our own engineers either missed or ignored. Systems that should have collapsed centuries ago were kept operational through thousands of incremental adaptations. Then we will implement those adaptations ourselves, Zark insisted. With what expertise? Zeltorin demanded. Our technical specialists have spent millennia following established protocols, never deviating from approved methodologies. The humans were improvisers, experimenters. They didn't just maintain, they improved. That mindset cannot be replicated overnight. Katie deactivated the feed. She had seen enough. They're beginning to understand, she said quietly, more to herself than her aide. Too late to fix it. Too late to call us back. The massive fleet entered the dark zone, disappearing from conventional space as specialized drives engaged, following pathways charted through decades of secret exploration. Behind them, the mighty Galactic Council, that 10,000-year bastion of stability and order, faced the greatest crisis in its history. Not from external attack or natural disaster, but from the simple withdrawal of unacknowledged support. Captain Vorth of the science vessel. Deep Seeker led the Council's first official expedition into the Dark Zone 3 months after humanity's departure. The ship's advanced sensors probed the unusual spatial phenomena that had always made this region difficult to navigate. Behind the Deep Seeker followed 5 additional vessels, representing the Council's most advanced scientific and exploratory capabilities. Boundary crossing in 5 standard minutes, announced the navigation officer, transitioning to autonomous guidance systems. Vorth acknowledged the report with a gesture of his upper limbs. As a member of the Korthi species, methane breathers with exceptional analytical capabilities, he had been selected to lead this mission for his renowned caution and methodical approach. The Council needed information about humanity's destination, but they could not afford to lose their most advanced exploratory fleet in the attempt. All vessels confirm transition protocols, Vorth ordered. Maintain communication linkage at all costs. The small fleet crossed the invisible boundary that separated mapped Council space from the Dark Zone. Immediately, sensor readings became erratic. Spatial distortions created false echoes. Navigation systems struggled to maintain accurate positioning. Detecting artificial structures, reported the sensor officer suddenly. Configuration unknown. Scale massive. Vorth moved to the sensor station, examining the readings personally. The officer's assessment had been understated. The structures, if they were indeed structures and not sensor artifacts, extended for thousands of kilometers in multiple directions. Their purpose was incomprehensible from the limited data available. "Hail them," Vorth ordered. "Standard Council protocols, all frequencies." The communications officer complied, sending the carefully crafted diplomatic message that had been prepared for this moment. For several minutes, there was no response. Then, abruptly, every system on the Deep Seeker activated simultaneously. Displays filled with data. Sensors recorded information they hadn't been programmed to detect. The ship's artificial intelligence began processing inputs that shouldn't have existed. Automated defense systems, Vorth realized. "They're scanning us." A message appeared on the main communication display. Text only. "Council vessels identified. Proceed no further. Human space is closed to Council traffic." "Respond," Vorth instructed. "We come seeking dialogue, not confrontation. The Council wishes to establish communication with human leadership regarding matters of mutual concern." The reply came instantly. "Request denied. Return to Council space." Vorth hesitated. His mission parameters included establishing contact, if at all possible, even at significant risk. "Transmit diplomatic authorization codes," he ordered. "Indicate our peaceful intentions and the critical nature of our mission." For several minutes, there was no response. Then, unexpectedly, a new communication channel opened. The display showed a human female, her appearance distinguished by age lines that humans, unlike most Council species, displayed as they grew older. "This is Dr. Elena Brooks, Diplomatic Liaison for the Human Architect Cooperative. Your persistence is noted. Captain Vorth, what is so urgent that the Council would risk sending ships into space they formally relinquished all claim to?" Vorth straightened, adopting the formal posture his species used for high-level negotiations. "Dr. Brooks, the Council faces unprecedented challenges following humanity's departure. Critical systems are failing across multiple sectors. 17 worlds now experience severe food shortages. Transit networks operate at 30% capacity. We seek technical assistance to prevent catastrophic infrastructure collapse." Elena's expression remained neutral. "You expelled us, Captain, unanimously, with only 3 dissenting votes. Now you discover you need us?" "Not unanimously," Vorth corrected. "My own world voted against expulsion, as did Proxima and Tau Ceti. But yes, the Council now recognizes the extensive contributions humanity made to our infrastructure, contributions that were never officially acknowledged. Because they were never officially permitted," Elena noted. "Your regulations would have prevented the very innovations that kept your civilization functioning. So we improved your systems quietly, without seeking recognition." Vorth lowered his eyes in the gesture of concession his species used to acknowledge truth. "The Council has authorized me to offer terms for humanity's return. Full membership restored, amnesty for all unauthorized modifications, recognition of human innovation as a valuable asset to collective security." Elena smiled, but the expression held no warmth. "Too late, Captain. We've moved beyond the Council's understanding of innovation or security. We've found something far more significant out here in the darkness between galaxies." The communication display split, showing a second image alongside Elena's face. Vorth and his crew stared in collective shock at what appeared to be a construction project of impossible scale, a lattice of energy and matter extending through multiple dimensions, portions of it seeming to fade in and out of conventional reality. What is that?" Vorth finally managed to ask. "We call them the architects," Elena explained. "They've existed in the spaces between conventional matter since before the first stars formed. Humanity encountered them shortly after we began exploring the Dark Zone, not because we were looking for them, but because we were the first species willing to explore without predetermined expectations of what we might find. Vorth struggled to process this information. You've allied with these entities. Allied isn't precisely accurate, Elena replied. It's more correct to say we've synchronized with them. They think in patterns that extend beyond time as you understand it. They build on scales that make planetary engineering seem like a child's game, and they've been waiting for a species capable of comprehending their work. Which is what exactly? Vorth asked. Elena's expression softened slightly. They cultivate universes, Captain. They nurture the conditions for complexity and consciousness across multiple dimensional planes. And now, humanity assists them. We've found our purpose, one far greater than maintaining the Council's failing infrastructure. Vorth felt a chill, despite his environmental suit's perfect temperature regulation. Will you help us? He asked simply. No, Elena answered. Not in the way you're asking. The Council must evolve or collapse under its own rigidity. That choice belongs to you, not us. We will observe, but we will not intervene. Billions may die, Vorth protested. Only if you cling to systems that should have been redesigned centuries ago, Elena countered. You have the knowledge in your archives. You have the resources at your disposal. What you lack is the cultural willingness to embrace necessary change. That cannot be given to you. It must be developed through experience, even painful experience. The communication ended abruptly, leaving Vorth staring at a blank display. After a moment of silence, his executive officer spoke. Orders, Captain? Vorth turned away from the display. We return to Council space. We have much to report. The Deep Seeker and its companion vessels reversed course, leaving behind the incomprehensible structures and the civilization that had once been the Council's most troublesome and most valuable member. Back in Council space, the situation deteriorated rapidly. The carefully balanced ecosystem of interdependent worlds began to unravel as crucial systems failed. Agricultural worlds that had specialized in specific crops couldn't maintain production without the human-modified systems that had regulated environmental conditions. Manufacturing centers lost precision as calibration systems drifted from optimal settings. Transport networks became unreliable, leading to cascading shortages across thousands of worlds. The Council's response proved woefully inadequate. Committees debated priorities while infrastructure continued to degrade. Engineers studied human maintenance records, but struggled to implement the intuitive adaptations that human technicians had applied with seemingly casual brilliance. Species that had spent millennia specializing within narrow domains now found themselves unable to adopt the generalist perspective needed to address systemic failures. On 17 worlds, food shortages became famine. On 42 others, manufacturing collapse led to critical medical supply shortages. Populations that had never known hardship suddenly confronted mortality on scales not seen since before the Council's formation. The social fabric began to tear as individual species prioritized their own survival over collective welfare. Some worlds fared better than others. Those with greater independence from centralized systems, often the younger, less integrated Council members, adapted more quickly. The Proximans, having maintained closer relations with humans, benefited from more extensive knowledge transfer before the Exodus. They began developing their own innovations, tentatively at first, then, with growing confidence as necessity, overcame cultural resistance to change. Speaker Zark addressed a diminished council 5 years after humanity's departure. The once grand chamber now operated with minimal environmental control. The ceiling's star display darkened to conserve energy. Many podiums stood empty, their representatives unable to attend due to transportation limitations or preoccupied with crises on their homeworlds. The Structural Reformation Committee has completed its initial assessment, Zark announced. His harmonic voice pattern simplified to reduce the strain on failing acoustic systems. Implementation of new protocols will begin immediately. On 30 priority worlds. Resources have been allocated based on population density and strategic importance. 30 worlds? The Dorn representative's voice betrayed outrage. There are 850 member species in the Council. There were, Zark corrected grimly. Current functioning membership stands at 612. The remainder have either withdrawn from active participation or have lost the capacity for interstellar communication. Murmurs of alarm spread through the chamber. Even those aware of the Council's diminished state had not realized the extent of the contraction. The committee has established objective criteria for resource allocation, Zark continued. We cannot support all worlds simultaneously. We must prioritize. A sudden commotion at the chamber's entrance interrupted the proceedings. Council security personnel appeared to be arguing with unidentified visitors. Raised voices echoed through the hall. Then, unexpectedly, the security staff stepped aside, allowing a group of figures to enter. Humans. 5 of them, wearing uniforms unlike any seen in Council space before. Their leader, a tall male with dark skin and close-cropped silver hair, walked directly toward the central dais. Zark, momentarily speechless, made no move to stop him. Speaker Zark, representatives of the Galactic Council, the human announced in perfect Council standard, his voice carrying throughout the chamber without technological assistance. I am Admiral Tony Walsh of the Human Expeditionary Force. We have returned briefly to observe your transition and to deliver a message from our leadership. Admiral Walsh, Zark acknowledged, recovering his composure. The Council did not authorize this appearance. Walsh smiled thinly. We didn't request authorization, Speaker. Your defensive systems no longer function at capacity, and in any case, could not have prevented our arrival. To demonstrate his point, Walsh gestured toward the ceiling. The darkened star display suddenly illuminated, but instead of showing the traditional map of Council space, it displayed a real-time image of what hung in orbit above Nexus Prime. A vessel of impossible configuration, appearing to exist partially in dimensions beyond conventional space-time. Its structure seeming to bend and flow around itself in patterns that challenged comprehension. One of our smaller exploratory vessels, Walsh explained casually. Currently maintaining position through gravitational manipulations your sensors cannot detect, much less counter. The chamber fell silent. Hundreds of representatives staring at the display in collective shock. What do you want? Zark finally asked, all 6 limbs rigid with tension. Nothing from you, Walsh replied. We come only to observe and to inform. Humanity has found its place in a larger design. What you perceive as the dark zone is merely the boundary between conventional space-time and a multidimensional reality your sciences cannot yet comprehend. The entities we call architects have existed there since before the formation of galaxies. They cultivate complexity throughout the multiverse, nurturing the conditions for consciousness to emerge and evolve. And they've allied with humanity? Zark asked hesitantly. We synchronize with their purpose, Walsh corrected. They recognized in us what you feared, our adaptability, our restless curiosity, our willingness to transform ourselves and our environment. These qualities make us ideal partners in their work. Why tell us this? Asked the Proximan representative. Walsh turned toward Zeltorin. Because some among you demonstrated wisdom, when the majority did not. Because some worlds now struggle toward a new understanding of innovation and adaptation. The architects observed these developments with interest. He turned back to Zark. Your decision to expel humanity was your choice, made according to your values. We do not seek revenge or restitution. We will not save you from the consequences of that choice. But neither will we abandon this region of space entirely. We will observe. We will record. We will witness whether the Council adapts or perishes. And if we adapt? Zark asked, a new harmonic entering his voice pattern, something like hope, or perhaps desperation. Then, perhaps, generations from now, our civilizations may interact again as equals. Walsh replied, not as council member and subject, but as independent entities pursuing our separate evolutionary paths. With that, he turned and walked back toward his companions. Together, they moved toward the exit without further comment or acknowledgement. Wait, Zark called after them. The infrastructure, our systems are failing. Billions suffer. Will you not help? Walsh paused, turning back partially. You have the knowledge in your archives. You have the resources at your disposal. What you lack cannot be given. It must be developed. Evolution is rarely comfortable, Speaker Zark, but it is always necessary. The humans departed as suddenly as they had arrived. Within minutes, the strange vessel in orbit disappeared from sensors, leaving no trace of its presence save the memory of its impossible configuration. In the chamber, Speaker Zark stood motionless at the central dais, contemplating the enormity of what had transpired. The Council, that grand, stable collection of civilizations that had endured for 10 millennia, now faced the greatest challenge in its history. Not extinction, perhaps, but transformation. The rigid structures that had maintained peace and order for thousands of years would either evolve or collapse entirely. Some worlds would not survive the transition. Some species would perish, unable to adapt quickly enough to changing conditions. But others would transform, discovering capabilities long suppressed by the Council's emphasis on stability over innovation. New powers would emerge from the remnants of the old order. New alliances would form based on shared values, rather than traditional hierarchies. And somewhere beyond the boundaries of conventional space, humanity would continue its own evolution, not as the maintenance crew for an aging civilization, but as partners in a cosmic project beyond the comprehension of those they had left behind. In time, perhaps, the transformed remnants of the Council might encounter this new humanity again, no longer as superior and inferior, but as fellow travelers on divergent evolutionary paths. Speaker Zark gazed up at the ceiling display, now returned to its traditional star map. Many lights pulsed with warning colors, indicating crises on their corresponding worlds. Some had gone dark entirely, their monitoring systems offline, or their civilizations no longer able to participate in interstellar affairs. Yet others showed signs of adaptation, unusual energy signatures, non-standard communication patterns, innovative approaches to long-standing problems. In that moment, Zark understood what the humans had always known. True stability comes not from rigid adherence to established patterns, but from continuous adaptation to changing conditions. The Council had chosen stasis over evolution, certainty over possibility. Now they would discover whether they could learn what humanity had practiced instinctively, the art of creative transformation in the face of necessity. The chamber's environmental systems gave another shudder, then stabilized at a new configuration, less comfortable than before, but functional. A metaphor, perhaps, for the civilization it served, not as it had been, but as it might yet become, beyond the boundaries of Council space, beyond even the comprehension of most species that had evolved within conventional reality. Humanity continued its new work alongside the architects. They built on scales that made planetary engineering seem insignificant, manipulated energies that could birth or extinguish stars, and perceived patterns that extended beyond linear time. Dr. Elena Brooks, now serving as liaison between humanity and the multidimensional entities they had encountered in the darkness, sometimes reflected on the strange path that had brought her species to this point. Expelled from a community that simultaneously feared and depended upon them. Humans had found their true potential not in maintaining others' crumbling systems, but in participating in the grandest project imaginable, the cultivation of complexity and consciousness throughout the multiverse. She stood within a structure that existed partially outside conventional spacetime, observing patterns that her mind, even enhanced by architect technologies, could barely comprehend. Beside her stood a former council scientist, one of the few non-humans who had chosen to follow humanity into exile rather than remain with the failing council. "They're watching us, aren't they?" the scientist asked. "The council? I mean, they must have developed some capacity to observe the dark zone by now." "Some can," Elena confirmed. "The more adaptable species have begun developing technologies we never shared with them. Necessity drives innovation, after all. Will they survive? As a civilization, I mean—" Elena considered this question carefully. "Not as they were," she finally replied. "That civilization was fundamentally unsustainable, dependent on continuous hidden maintenance, while simultaneously rejecting the values that made that maintenance possible. But something new may emerge from its collapse. Something more viable." "And will we help them?" the scientist asked. "We already are," Elena said with a slight smile. "By not helping them, by allowing them to discover their own capacity for adaptation. It's the greatest gift we could offer, the opportunity to evolve beyond what they have been." Together, they watched as patterns of energy and information flowed through the multidimensional structure, carrying echoes of countless civilizations evolving across the multiverse. The architects had cultivated this garden of consciousness for billions of years, nurturing complexity wherever it emerged. Now humanity joined them as gardeners, rather than merely plants in that cosmic garden, participants in evolution rather than merely its subjects. In time, the remnants of the council might join them, having learned through hardship what humanity had discovered through curiosity, that true stability comes not from resisting change, but from embracing it, not from fearing difference, but from incorporating it, not from maintaining rigid structures, but from allowing new patterns to emerge from the creative chaos of existence. Until then, humanity would continue its work alongside the architects, shaping realities beyond the comprehension of those they had left behind. Not in anger or resentment, but in the simple recognition that different evolutionary paths sometimes require separation before they can converge again at higher levels of complexity and understanding. And so the great cycle continued, civilizations rising and falling, evolving or stagnating, separating and converging across timescales that made individual lives seem momentary and entire species merely transient expressions of cosmic possibility. Through it all, consciousness persisted, adapting to changing conditions, finding new forms of expression, and gradually awakening to its role in the universe's ongoing process of self-discovery and self-creation. The Council had chosen stasis and faced collapse. Humanity had chosen adaptation and found transcendence. Between these paths lay infinite possibilities for future civilizations to explore, a cosmic garden of forking paths, each leading toward different expressions of the universe's fundamental creativity. In the depths of what Council species still called the Dark Zone, that creativity now flourished in forms they could not yet imagine, the next iteration in an endless sequence of cosmic evolution, with humanity no longer merely maintaining crumbling systems, but participating in the creation of entirely new realities.